Have you ever thought about your workplace as an environment? In the natural world, we are all familiar with the sights and sounds around us. But even in the most beautiful settings, danger lurks. Your workplace is definitely an environment. And whether you work in an office, in a factory, or at home, this environment is going to have an impact on your health and safety. But, just like in the natural environment, there are different ways to deal with hazards to your health and safety. You can be ready to identify and address potential hazards, or you can be kept in the dark until it's too late. Your workplace environment affects you, just as all of your surroundings do. All sorts of factors are at play. How much or how little light there is to work by, how hot, how cold, the ventilation, the chemicals that may be in use, the tools that are available, the hours you put in, and the number of people doing the work all contribute to the environment of your workplace. Controlling hazards at their source is the most effective way of maintaining a healthy workplace. In a properly operating workplace, workers and managers are always on the lookout for hazards and talk about how to reduce or eliminate their source. At Camirco Chemicals, Trent Reeder is the worker rep and Joe Pitapa is the management rep on the Joint Health and Safety Committee. Here, the union and the employer have built a noteworthy safety record that's based on a solid, hazard-based approach to health and safety and an openness to new ideas.
If someone comes up with a suggestion for better improved ventilation system, I know I've brought it up on occasion, and within a day or two, one of the supervisors comes to me and asks, what can we do about it? It's always cooperation on both sides.
I think it's important when both employers and workers think about health and safety that they do so in a holistic manner, and that they understand that health and safety starts with the question of the broader work environment. What is in the work environment that could cause harm to the people who are present and working there?
At Baycrest Hospital, the Joint Health and Safety Committee identified intravenous needles as a hazard that through needle stick injuries can transmit deadly diseases such as hepatitis C and HIV. The workplace took action to eliminate the hazard by introducing needleless IV equipment.
Needle stick injuries among workers in the healthcare field, there's a high incidence, and we can tell from the stats that there is a high incidence. And when members get stick with needles, we're looking at contracting different diseases in different circumstances. Most institutions say that you don't do your procedure properly, that's the reason why you get stick. But that is not the reason why you get stick. These things happen, the patients move, you turn around, you need something, you get a swab, or it doesn't matter what you do, the risk is always there when you are going to use needles. Going to the needleless system is a plus for all workers, members, nurses, everyone.
Oh, it's much better. First of all, you don't have no connection with blood and no connections with needles. It decreases the chance to needle stick. Before we had to put a needle in this part to connect the IV. And if we don't need it, we can separate, and we're connecting to that, so we don't need the needle.
And that's where you used to get a lot of injuries by one medication is finished, you connect in the other medication. You don't have to use a needle. We just go to the needleless system. And this is how it's implemented and has saved a lot of the healthcare workers.
So under our health and safety legislation, there are obligations placed on what's often referred to as all the workplace parties. So obligations on employers, obligations on the owners of the premises, obligations on supervisors, and obligations on workers. So underlying this, of course, is a notion that there should be a safe work environment provided by the employer, and that workers should, sort of fit within that safe environment, not do anything to themselves create a risk. But the overlying obligation, of course, is with employers to provide the safe work environment.
The employer makes the final decision about workplace safety. But in some places, instead of addressing the hazard, as required by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, managers give directions on how to work around a hazard. This approach to health and safety, often referred to as behavior-based safety, or BBS, has been around since the 1930s. It's an old idea that's found new legs, and it's been creeping back into some jurisdictions in North America over the last several years.
The theory that underlies the behavior-based approach to safety comes out of, in part, some basic research done by a guy named H.W. Heinrich in the United States. He was an insurance investigator for Travelers Insurance Company, and he did what is loosely referred to as research. He collected supervisors' accident reports, and at the end of his review, he made the determination, based on what the supervisor's accident report said, was that 88% of injuries were caused by workers' unsafe acts. That is the research that underlies the modern-day behavior-based safety programs that we're seeing.
We found that the underlying theory that runs all of these programs is an unsafe worker theory.
Behavior-based safety programs was an important agenda item at this international conference of steelworkers in Toronto.
I wanted to come back to those signs that are up in many of our workplaces that we've gone so many days. In Pasadena, Texas, they had just completed 5 million hours without a lost time injury, and then the plant exploded. And the question is, what did that 5 million mean? That 5 million person hours without a lost work time injury?
Every day, the program supervisor is going to come around.
Of course, the behavior-based safety approach doesn't reduce occupational illness or injuries. So at many BBS workplaces, a strategy is developed to stop injury reports from getting filed. Getting workers to buy in is crucial to maintaining the appearance that the BBS approach is working.
That jackpot is going to increase $1.
We had a prize that was a boat motor and a trailer. I was sitting outside the game. It was unbelievable, the pressure that the guys had. And it was talked about it at work all day. It was like, don't let it get hurt, don't report that injury. In fact, we had a guy who lost his thumb and didn't put in a lost time injury. And the employer went and picked him up at the hospital is when they amputated the rest of the thumb off and sewed it up, and he went right back to work next day so he wouldn't put in a lost time claim.
Hazards are in the workplace. The Occupational Health and Safety Act in Ontario says that we have to, the company has to address the hazards, the supervisor has to address the hazards, and the worker has to address the hazards. When you move away from the legislated health and safety program to a program that says the worker is the problem, then we're going nowhere.
We were doing an audit one day with some of the company people, and there was a puddle of oil on the floor. And the BBS approach to that puddle of oil was, if you were a worker, you'd walk down there and you better have safety boots on that were non-slip, so if you happen to step in it, you wouldn't fall down and hurt yourself. But the hazard-based approach is to look and see where that oil came from. And we found that there was an overhead crane with a gearbox leaking and got that fixed. And that's the difference between behavioral-based safety and hazard-based approach to safety.
Good day, I'm Gord Gresham from Local 7656, a potash mine out in the middle of the prairies. Our company in their foresight brought this marvelous BBS in. Different guises, different names, we went through everything, lost control. We call it everything we could.
In Saskatchewan, some workers in the mining industry have been struggling with a behavior-based approach to health and safety for a while.
People here that don't have this policy, for Christ's sakes, listen to what's being said today and stand up against it for all you can.
Nobody comes to work in the morning, I believe, to be hurt. So you have this subconsciousness that I have done something wrong. This is what's caused my accident. I guess my main concern right now is do not take the blame for something you didn't control. True, you control your actions, but you're still given a specific area or conditions that you have to operate in. You cannot accept responsibility for all that.
I'm going to tell you the main problem I have in our plant is our own members. We tell them what the problem is, and to straighten out the problem is to wear your mask, and they don't wear them. You know, and you keep trying to tell them that, but
Why do they have to wear a mask?
because the vapors out of the greaser, I wouldn't want to sniff them.
Well, what should be the right thing to do? Vent it. Get rid of the hazard.
Some workers get fooled by this system. Some think it's a good thing because training is training, training is positive. We're always trying to fight for training, but there's the good training and the bad training. And the idea is to be able to catch and weed out what is negative to workers and what actually will make change and educate and have input of workers and be positive to actually correct those hazards and those unhealthy situations at the workplace.
Okay. So go ahead and just do some typing that you were doing before we came in.
Hazard reduction and elimination is part of the work of the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, or OCAL, a free service that helps workers and managers, in particular joint health and safety committees, address potentially unhealthy workplace situations.
Oftentimes we think that the problem is within the worker. The person is weak, the person is female, the person is old. But the truth is that if the work is too challenging for the worker, if it's too stressful, too hard, too repetitive, too heavy, it does not matter who it is, the person will break. Therefore, it is not necessary just to focus on the person. It is very important to focus on the workplace.
One more thing is it's missing the armrest, so she's not getting elbow support here.
It really jumps out to us
Yeah,
that
those
there's
are
no
the-
adjustability of this
Yeah,
workstation.
there's no keyboard tray there as well to bring her elbows back.
Unless you go beyond the individual factors and look at the workplace factors, the organizational factors, the environment, what hazards and controls there are and aren't in place. Unless you do that, you're going to have this continual cycle of disease and disability. And by going beyond the individual to the workplace, you hope to minimize those factors and reach more workers rather than just a worker at a time.
Should I be straight or?
The focus of ergonomics is basically fitting the task to the person. So the key is to make modifications to the workstation, tools or equipment so they would address the physical characteristics or the capabilities and limitations of that worker. Because if those aspects are addressed, the chances or the risk of getting hurt or getting injuries, you're minimizing those.
The natural environment, like the one in the workplace, isn't hazard-free. But like the safety railings next to these falls, it's important to deal with the hazards at their source to protect people from injury wherever and whenever possible.